Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy. Greetings. How are you, Taina?
Hello.
Today is going to be a grab bag episode for our 99th. Ding. I should have turned off my notifications. I'll start again. Hi, Taina.
Hello.
Today is our 99th episode, which means our next episode will be a live episode. So if you want to come and join us and chat with us, that will be live on YouTube next week on Tuesday because Monday is a holiday. So we're going to do it on the T6 at noon Central, 1 Eastern. Find us on our YouTube channel. Come join the chat, talk to us, and we're going to be doing some reflections and stuff. But for today, for our 99th episode, is that the penultimate episode? I believe.
Penultimate, yes.
Yes, I love that word. We're just doing a grab bag because we don't know what to talk about. And we just thought we'd hit on some trending topics that'll be less trending by the time you hear this, but hopefully are still interesting. So where do you want to start, Taina?
Let's start with the roast.
Boy, Kevin Hart. It was the roast of Kevin Hart. I don't like roasts. I'm going to start off there. I'm personally just not a huge fan of being mean to people, just to be mean to people. Like, I know I'm not a comedian, I'm not a comic, so this isn't my lane, and I understand that, and it's not meant for me. So I guess I'm sort of prefacing to say, this wasn't intended for me. I'm not the audience for this because I don't like roasts in general. I don't think they're particularly fun or funny. That said, I know some people enjoy them. I find that humor is best when you are punching up. I firmly believe that. I think it's very much aligned with an intersectional approach to life. Like in the same ways that when we are fighting power dynamics, we need to worry about the power dynamics above us and not. So in point being, as a white woman, my fight should be with white men. My fight doesn't need to be with black men. Right? My fight doesn't need to be obviously with black women. My fight is so I can fight patriarchy and racism, but where those overlap and now racism is a factor, I tend to stay out of discussions about black men because I feel like that's punching laterally at best, if not punching down. Right. And so I feel like, no, my fight is against racism and patriarchy in the places that it is something that I have power to affect change. And where I'm not potentially causing harm because I also share an oppressor identity. And that's why I think when we're roasting or when people are making comedians in general, when they're making jokes, I think, again, it's about, I think at its best, comedy is about calling out power, right? Speaking truth to power and affecting change in that way. I think George Carlin did it really well because, you know, he was a white man and he directed his stuff at like the rich and the powerful. And the people who were higher on that hierarchy than him instead of trying to punch down. From what I heard, I could, please, if I'm wrong, let me know. And I think part of my problem with roast is too often there's a lot of punching laterally and punching down that ends up, in my opinion, feeling really yucky. And I think that was part of the problem with this roast is there was a lot of that. And that said, I also feel like it's not exactly my lane to be talking about because much of the humor that's in question is not all of it, because some of it's from white folks and I will speak to that. But some of it is, either black men or black women talking to each other. And that doesn't feel like it's my place to provide commentary. So that's my starting point. How about you?
I don't like roast either. There's a lot of secondhand cringe that happens watching a roast, I think. That just makes me very uncomfortable. I don't mind being mean to people, like if it's warranted. There's also like a snarky, like I just kind of have like a little bit of not a little bit, a lot actually, if you ask my wife, but like a really snarky kind of mean side, playfully mean, like mean flirting kind of side to me. So like I mean, I think being mean it depends. But with the roast, like I think that's not like spontaneously getting into like some banter with someone or something happening and now you're like respectfully or disrespectfully putting someone in their place, like this is a curated environment specifically to be mean to people. And so and it's usually the energy is usually like who can be the meanest, which I think that's what gives me like the biggest ick when it comes to roast, it's like it's a competition to see who can like go the lowest and like who can
Mhm.
be the ugliest and who can be the meanest. So I didn't watch it. I did not watch the roast of Kevin Hart. I usually don't watch roast.
I
I've
I did
seen
not
a few.
either, so to be clear, this is all
Yeah.
secondhand news for both of us.
Right, right.
And I don't watch it because I
I've
don't
seen
enjoy roasts.
Yeah, like it's one of those things like you watch it or I watch it anyway, or if I see any clips, like because I've seen clips of a few of them like on social media, but like even the roast of what's that bitch's name? The white
There's
lady,
so many bitches, I don't know who.
the
Chelsea Handler,
author
'cause she was
who's no, not Chelsea Hannah. She's not a comedian. She's like a right wing conservative. She wrote
oh,
books.
Ann Coulter. I remember that one
Ann
now, yes.
Coulter, yes, Ann Coulter. Like, she had a roast a few years ago, and I remember seeing a few clips, and I laughed. I mean, the jokes are funny, but there was also a part of me that was like, ugh. Like, you just get that, like, I get that uncomfortable feeling of just like, I don't want to be in the room while this is happening, even though I'm technically not in the room, but I'm privy to being part of the audience, like the virtual space. And so I was like, this feels like a private conversation that I'm like now a fly in the wall on for.
Listen, my husband and I will sometimes make jokes or say things that we wouldn't say with other people about
Hmm.
people, right? Like
Yeah.
I might say something really kind of cruel about someone I hate or something that I would
Hmm.
never say in another space or with other people. I
Yeah.
think we do need our outlets to get out some of our dark thoughts, our
Yeah.
unkind thoughts. It's not like we don't all have them, right? And do those things need to be aired for everyone?
No.
Is it appropriate? Like, can you think Ann Coulter is a hateful person and not have to insult the way she looks in front of a large audience? Because again,
Hmm.
would I maybe tell my husband, say something not so kind about the way Ann Coulter looks? I probably have. Right? But would I do that with an audience knowing that that is not helping women? Even if I don't like
Hmm.
her, it doesn't help
Hmm.
women to again reduce women to looks when there is
Yeah.
right there for the picking the fact that she's a hateful person,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
talk about instead, or the ways that she's contributing to the rhetoric that's out there. Like there are so many other things that we can talk about that are not being so reductive to, again, play into not even just stereotypes, but play into the systemic harms that are caused to people
Hmm.
with certain identities, right?
Hmm.
So when we
Hmm.
reduce women to only their looks, we are contributing to things like rape culture, right? Now,
Yeah.
it may seem like,
Yeah.
it's just a joke. And I
It's
get
just a
that.
joke. Yeah.
But it's all of those things compounded that give men this internal permission to treat women like they are nothing but pieces of meat, right? And
Hmm.
so, and the same to me is to be said when we're talking about people of color. When we reduce
Hmm.
Black people to their Blackness in these jokes,
Hmm.
right? We can say, that's a joke, you're being too uptight, but it's the culmination of all of that
Hmm.
that then
Hmm.
again gives the people who don't have any depth of understanding, who don't know the people, who don't get the relationships, right? That's why it's like amongst yourselves and your comedy club when there's nobody
Yeah.
around, it's not being recorded, be how you want to be. But it's the televised nature of it that's inviting other people in. And I think,
Yeah.
again, it's about this permission structure that I think it creates for people who already have that seed of hate for someone to say, well, he gets away with it. He can call him the N word. He can do the whatever. So why can't
Hmm.
I?
Hmm.
Or to even
Yeah.
feed into some of those beliefs that you already hold about those people. And that
Yeah.
to me is, we just have to be so careful. I just think people take their platforms a little too lightly.
Yeah. Yeah. And people forget that like the things that we say and do don't exist in a vacuum. Like they exist in conversation with these social structures that we are a part of. And so everything that comes out of our mouth or every action that we take, like we have to, not that we should be like so anxious or so fearful that we can't like just be, but also like we have to be reflective about how I'm behaving or the things that I'm saying and doing, like how are those things going to be perceived within this wider culture that I'm a part of. And also you don't want people to get the wrong idea about you, right? Like if you're a person who is like against rape culture, things like that, like then you joking about whether it feels harmless in the moment or not, like can give someone the wrong impression about where you stand and where your values are, right? And so It's
Well, here's an
definitely.
example of a joke that I feel, I mean, because I'll tell you some of the things roughly since you didn't watch it, and maybe you haven't seen as many clips as I've seen. But there was a basketball star. Don't ask me to tell you who. I don't follow basketball. But a black man who came out and made a joke about Chelsea Handler. And the joke was related to basketball. So he said something about
Mhm.
like, I would never date Chelsea Handler because I'm whoever I am, and I don't hit threes. Because I'm assuming that means he's known for not making shots, free
Mhm.
shots, right?
Mhm.
3-pointers. And at the same time, though, calling her a three. Now she laughed. He's black, she's
Mhm.
white, right? But there was also the male and female dynamic. And
Mhm.
I think there are things that he could have joked about with Chelsea Handler
Mhm.
about being a white woman. And some of the things
Mhm.
she's done in the past, like having a special, as
Yeah.
I remember, called like "You Got to Be Kidding Me" or something, right? Like I think there was
Mhm.
plenty there that as a black man he
Mhm.
could have made jokes about and critiqued that would have been
Mhm.
so appropriate and calling out the power dynamic there versus
Mhm.
falling into the patriarchal stuff and
Yeah.
attacking only her looks and attacking her as reducing her to appearance. When again, I
Mhm.
just think there are so many other things there he's a basketball player. He's not a comedian. That's also part of the problem. We have these people come on who aren't comics trying to
Yeah.
be funny.
Yeah.
And that's an issue because they don't know what they're doing and they're just doing the joke somebody gave them. But somebody with some skill and some intelligence could have
Yeah.
easily, and I'm not saying he's not intelligent, but he doesn't have comic intelligence,
Comic
right? Like he's not,
intelligence. Yeah.
right. Yeah. He's not a comic. So this isn't his forte. But as somebody who understood that and had some depth to their comedy could have written jokes that would have been fantastic and called her
Yeah.
out on stuff that she's done that has been about the power identity she holds rather than attacking the oppressed identity she holds. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? And
Yeah.
that's what rubs me the wrong way is that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
I'll let you tell anything you want to say about that one before you tell about some of the racist jokes.
No, no, I have nothing to say there.
Okay.
Again, I
Okay.
haven't even seen any of the clips. I just know that it happened.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
I
So
think what you said about, like, if you're comics and you're in a room and you're roasting each other, like, go for it, but, like, to put this on such a
yeah.
general audience, like, for people to just sit in and watch, like, I think that's where we kinda lose
Yeah.
the plot a little bit.
And again, they can say, get over yourself. You guys are too uptight. Oh, you must be a lot of fun. That's the kind of shit that I hear online all the time when you
Mhm.
critique this kind of stuff. Men
Mhm.
love, especially, to come up and be like, oh, you must be a lot of fun at a party. I'm like, not with
Mhm.
you. But I can actually have a great time at a party.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I do have a lot of fun. But that doesn't have to come at the expense of calling people names and being unkind or relying on power dynamics
Mhm.
to, insult people. And they'll say that, but then Chelsea Handler I think she has literally over 1 million followers on some of her platforms. She has a very large audience. I'm assuming that basketball player probably has a very large audience as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this
Sure.
clip of Chelsea Handler has been shown everywhere and of her just laughing along. And now part of it is
Mhm.
I don't fault her for laughing because also when
Mhm.
you are the person in the joke who is the person whose identity is being battered, right? Your
Mhm.
oppressed identity in that moment is the one that's being um
Mhm.
attacked by somebody with the dominant identity in that
Mhm.
moment, right? So this was a patriarchal kind of joke. So I understand why she might have laughed. I think every woman can relate to that too. We've been in those moments
Mhm.
with men making jokes about women's
Mhm.
appearance or whatever and
Mhm.
feeling that pressure to, ha ha, ha, yeah, right? But
Mhm.
that clip of her being shown to her millions of followers, of her laughing about the fact that she's a three and he won't hit her because he's too good for her, what does that tell all the young women that follow her?
Yeah.
Can she laugh about that joke in a comedy club with him or wherever she wants? Yeah, but when she puts it out on a big public platform like that, knowing that younger women follow her, women who are in this world, when she shows up to be somebody who's so strong and tough and whatever, like anyway, okay. The big jokes that got all the feedback and the reason there's getting a lot of critique as they should. One was from Pete Davidson. And I don't remember what his specific joke was, but he's a white comic. Shane Gillis, who got fired from SNL, you may remember years ago for some racist things in the past that he had
Mhm.
said was there. And then some other guy I don't know, who's also a white guy, Tony Hinchcliffe maybe, who is apparently a known MAGA kind of guy. Why those two? I always thought Pete Davidson was more progressive. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
But the other two, they're known to be racist dicks. So why is Kevin Hart, does he get a say in who gets to be there? Who's deciding who's there?
Mhm.
Why is he laughing along at these racist pricks jokes at his expense?
Mhm.
And again, there is this part of me that understands it, right? I understand that
Mhm.
reaction when you're in that moment.
Yeah.
So one, Shane Gillis, the former SNL guy, made a joke about playing on Kevin Hart's height, fine, but saying something about how they would have to lynch him from a cactus or something because he's so short. Some sort of a joke
Oh
about
God,
height.
that's so distasteful.
It's disgusting. He made a lynching joke. And that's not funny anyway, but it's really not funny in a climate that we live in now. And people like
Yeah.
lynchings, I think white people with power who don't understand anything think lynching ended long ago. Lynching is continuing.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
black people being lynched every year in the US. It still happens.
Yeah.
So that was one, disgusting. And the other guy's joke, Tony Hinchcliffe's joke, was about George Floyd and saying something along the line of like, oh, George Floyd would be laughing along with all this if he were here, or something like, if he were here, George Floyd would be laughing till he couldn't breathe, leaving the pause in. I won't edit this very long pause of your disgusted reaction. Yeah. So those are the two that got the biggest feedback. I can't remember Pete Davidson's joke, but it was inappropriate too. And there was just a lot of like racism jokes.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts about those? Pete
It's
Davidson's joke quickly was different and not. So okay, I want to make sure that I'm clear that
okay.
about because it's important, I think, since I just talked about these two racist pricks making incredibly racist jokes. What's been interesting is Pete Davidson, at the same time that Tony Hinchcliffe and whatever that other guy's name are in so much trouble for their racist jokes, people are focusing in on Pete Davidson because he made a joke about Charlie Kirk. And interestingly, so many people on the right are really upset about that, yet don't seem to have that same hate and vitriol for these disgusting jokes about lynching and about
Yeah.
George Floyd, which, by the way, George Floyd is a very important example of a modern day lynching. So
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
I want to hear your reactions to all of that since you didn't know about those.
Well, I want to contextualize this for people who may not know a lot about, and I don't assume to be an expert on comedy culture and like roast. Like I said, I don't watch roasts because they just give me too much secondhand embarrassment. But like when these people are there, they're intoxicated. Like they're under the influence of at least one, if not multiple substances, right? So like some people
They
are
are
drunk
often
and
drinking, yes.
so
Mhm.
like so there's a cultural there's a lot happening on this stage, right? The other thing I will say is like and I remember having this conversation with an old boss of mine about just like the way geography plays a role in like cultural norms, right? So like for instance, this was when I lived in Atlanta. So like if I had close friends from Atlanta who were white, who were using the N-word casually, if like in the way that you would use it, in the way that black men use it towards each other,
Okay.
like soft A, like that would not be okay. But I have close friends from New York who are not black, who use soft A N word. And while in the bigger scope of culture, that generally is not okay within closed doors, right? Because of the nature of the relationship, because of the nature of the culture of the city, right? Like it's different. It's different. I'm not saying it's better. I'm saying it's different from that happening in the South somewhere, right? So like again, there are a lot of things happening on this stage that contribute to these kinds of scenarios, right? There's the relationship dynamics, there's the alcohol and substance dynamics, there's the comedy dynamics, there's the race, there's the gender, right? Like there's so many layers here. Again, not making any of that okay, just setting the stage for like what we're walking into when we talk about something like this. That being said, again, like behind closed doors, if those are your buddies and those are the kind of jokes you want to make with the people that you're close to, like have at it. But I think it goes back to what you said earlier. Like on a stage like this, where the level of influence, the amount of people that are going to be watching this, I could interpret it the wrong way or not even interpret it because those are tasteless jokes. That's lazy comedy, first of all. Like, that is such lazy comedy to like make a joke like that without having to actually use your intellect to make something funnier, to make a actual joke, as opposed to just like picking on something that whatever. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty awful. I don't think that there's anything else to say besides that's not okay. It's pretty awful. And it doesn't surprise me that like Pete Davidson is the one getting most of the attention for his Charlie Kirk joke versus the other
Yeah,
two.
as I just looked up a little bit more about him as well while you were talking, is he was the only one, or well, not the, I shouldn't say only one, again, I didn't watch it, but he was going after like Tony Hinchcliffe and some of these other folks on the stage
Mm-hmm.
and calling out their shit, like calling them Nazis and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So at least there
Mm-hmm.
was someone with power in the room who was calling out the power in the
Mm-hmm.
room for punching
Mm-hmm.
down. So kudos to Pete Davidson on that. So I want to be clear,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not now equating him to Shane Gillis and Tony Hinchcliffe. He was calling
Mm-hmm.
them out. Good, because we need that. I want to just draw a line from like, so some of this can be like, who cares, right? Like I get where people
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, don't make such a big
Mm-hmm.
deal out of nothing. But I want
Mm-hmm.
to sort of go from here to something clearly political and sort of show the threads of how we get there. And so the
Mm-hmm.
first is before, because I want to end up at gerrymandering. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a real easy line to get there. And I think you probably can follow me
Mm-hmm.
too, how this
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
But the in between line, the in between piece from here to there is what's also interesting is there's a lot of rhetoric online about this roast, about we don't have to talk about it, but there's also this life coach who's Black who had claimed to have a PhD. It's been found out that maybe she's been lying about that. There's a lot of on at least on threads where I tend to hang out, and I don't know, but I know the Kevin Hart roast has been everywhere, where there's been this a lot of like judgy calling out, being really critical and all of that, and shamey. And I do find it interesting that there is so much sort of vitriol for these stories when they are centering Black people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, why is it that this Kevin Hart roast is getting so much feedback like this? And so many people sort of pointing to Kevin Hart as the problem here, not necessarily the
Mm-hmm.
people who made the jokes, them too, but and why is it this woman is getting all this hate when we could talk about Mel Robbins till we're blue in the face and her grifting and
Mm-hmm.
everything else, and people don't seem to care. I do find it interesting that the kinds of stories that get elevated like this for so much critique often are stories that are centering Black people. I don't know.
Mm.
Do you have thoughts on that?
No, I do. I do, because it does feel that way to me as well. I think when it's a white person at the center of the controversy, people are generally, it feels like, much more gracious, much more willing to make excuses or to just let things pass. Or maybe it makes headline, but doesn't stay a headline very long, right? Like it's easily gets overpassed or overshadowed by something else. I think there's a sense of exotification, right?
Mm,
When it comes to Black and brown bodies, especially when it comes to like media and news, that makes it sensational, right? Like that makes the story more sensational and it makes it more sticky, right? People are more likely to follow along because of this exotification. And when I say exotification, I mean literally treating Black and brown bodies like they're animals. And we can trace that all the way back to
yeah.
enslavement, right? And how Black and brown
Taina,
bodies were like,
go ahead.
no, how Black and brown bodies were like just treated as inhumane, as objects, right? To be gawked at, to be observed, right? As opposed to they were stripped of their human dignity. And I think this is just a reflection of that kind of culture where Black and brown bodies continue to be stripped of their dignity in this sensationalization, this exotification of the news cycle, right? Where other stories don't seem as interesting because they don't have this caricature of a Black or brown person at the center of it. And so it's less likely to be newsworthy and to stick.
It's so interesting because I think it still happens. It certainly used to be even more the case that even in like mainstream publications, women's beauty magazines and things, people would use the word exotic to describe the looks
Mm-hmm.
of people who weren't white,
They
right? And
still
I
use
think
it.
that's
They still
still,
use that
yeah,
word. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting you point that out.
I remember being in high school and we had a German exchange student, and there was a clash of cultures there, obviously, already, because we're in the middle of nowhere, Florida, like one stoplight town, dirt roads, like I tell people where it is and they've never even heard of it. And we have this German exchange student, right? And he and I became friends. And I remember once he told me, he was like, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Like you look really exotic." And I was in high school at the time. I was like, "Oh, whatever." And so like it was like a compliment. And I still think to this day, I still think he meant it as a compliment. Like I don't
I
think he
don't
was like,
I would say 90% of people who are doing it aren't thinking the way you are
yeah,
thinking. But that's not the
right,
point.
right. Yeah, that's not the point. The point is that it's tied into this larger conversation of how Black and brown bodies are treated as like these objects
Yes.
to be like admired and just like gazed upon.
In the same way that people who don't understand that and other pieces of the history of looks and bodies and racism, again, I'm thinking of Sabrina Strings and Fearing the Black
Mhm.
Body, because you might compliment people about them looking
Mhm.
thin as if that's a compliment, and not in any way in your mind drawing any lines of like, oh, I think you look more white or like whatever.
Mhm.
You're not thinking that. It is because it has become the norm. It has become the standard,
Yeah.
right? And so these are just things that you pick up, and without inquisition, you don't understand where they're coming from, and you don't understand
Mhm.
how it's
Mhm.
contributing to the larger systemic issue, which again is what I'm talking about with the roast, in that sure, in a vacuum, if this were to exist in a vacuum, it would be a different story. But when you
Yeah.
then take
Yeah.
and publicize, put it out to a large audience, share clips with your millions of followers, it's no longer in a vacuum. It's existing inside of and contributing to these systemic issues.
Yeah. And it's not just a large audience, it's a global audience.
Exactly. I mean,
Online
everything is
culture
now,
is a
right?
global audience. It's not just here in the US. No, it's fucking everywhere.
Yeah. So, okay. So the fact that one, this happens, it's on a global stage, it's playing into all sorts of stereotypes and issues that are thought patterns that contribute to upholding the systems as they are, right? Then we talk about the fact that when these stories come up, it tends to be centering Black experiences and or sometimes other marginalized identities, right? Maybe sometimes it's a queer story that gets sort of that same level
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
anger because of for the similar reason. I do find it
Mhm.
tends to be very often when it's about Black folks. Like people love to harp on Oprah now. And it's like, yeah, I think Oprah's terrible for a lot of reasons. And
Mhm.
there are many more white men who are far worse that we could also be talking about. So
Yeah.
why do we,
Yeah.
right? Why we do this? Okay. Because then the thread goes to what's happening at the same time as all of this is gerrymandering like we haven't seen since Jim Crow, right? Like
Mhm.
it is terrifying. The voter Voting Rights Act, boy, my mouth isn't working today. The Voting Rights Act of what is it, 65 has been stripped back
Mhm.
to basically clear the way for states to behave as racist as they want, to be as racist as they want, to gerrymander the hell out of their districts, to basically eradicate the Black vote from existence, to make it impossible for Black folks to have representation of what they actually are wanting when they go to the ballot box. And it's
Mhm.
happening. I mean, Tennessee just literally changed themselves to an entirely red state. The only Black district, and I say Black meaning it was Democrat, and in fact, it's been led by a Black or white woman before, but it was a majority Black district that chose somebody who would represent their voice in Congress. That
Mhm.
district has been taken away. And now there is nowhere in the state that has a majority Black vote, despite
Mhm.
what the population may look like in Memphis,
Mhm.
particularly.
Mhm.
South Carolina has done something similar. Texas did as much as they could. My state of Missouri just got rid of the majority Black district in Kansas City. So now we have only one. I will say, with a tiny bit of pride, it's my district that I live in. But I now live in the only district left in the US or in Missouri that is a Democrat led district.
Mhm.
Hopefully, will be represented by the amazing Cori Bush again. Let's get rid of Wesley Bell. It's happening all over the place. And I don't think that you can separate these things. It is not as if I would say, oh, the Kevin Hart roast and the way people are reacting to that roast is the reason the gerrymandering's happening. Of
Yeah.
course not. But there's a thread between these things that is not invisible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
There
don't know
is.
if I
There
don't want to be
is.
the only one to speak on it because I know that you probably have things to say.
There is because I think when you think about comedy, right, and just pop culture in general as a reflection, right?
Right.
It's kind of got this symbiotic relationship with culture at large, right? It's both a reflection of how people feel and how they think. And it also influences how people feel and how they think. And so it's just this like loop that just keeps going. It doesn't stay in the same place. It evolves outward, right? And so it's a circle that's moving in space and time. And so when we think about these jokes that are to us apparently very clearly racist and inappropriate, like inappropriate at best, racist
And
at
and
worst.
in my opinion, not funny. But go ahead.
Not funny, yeah. Um uh when we think about that as a reflection of people's attitudes towards the livelihood of Black and brown people, like then we can say, okay, well, if that's if the general consensus to that kind of belief system is laughter, then who's laughing at that? How many people are laughing at that? Where are they laughing at that? And what is the impact of that laughter, right? What is the impact of that blasé attitude um, towards the lives of Black and brown people? And then that opens up conversations and more questions and answers about who those people are and where they are and the kind of power that they have to make decisions like redistricting, budgeting, educational policy. I mean, that's on a big scale. On a small scale, it's people who laugh at that, who make decisions about who gets promoted at work, who gets hired at your job, who gets fired at your job when it's time for layoffs, right? Like that's on a very small scale. Like which child in the classroom gets attention versus which one doesn't, right? Which child in the classroom gets deemed, being misbehaved versus someone who just needs a nap or just needs an apple, right? Like on a very, very small scale, those are the decisions that people who laugh at jokes like that are making. On a big scale, it's redistricting, it's Supreme Court cases, it's who goes to war over what, right?
Yeah. And these moments are what are giving them that permission structure, right? That instruction, that feeling that it's okay, right? Because they're laughing about it, whatever. And I think it could be helpful too for people. Like, I want to flip it on its head real quickly too, to draw a comparison. So the Voting Rights Act of 65 is what's being stripped away. Around that time, not long after, it was a time of deep turmoil and racial issues going on in the US. And what happened on TV then? Norman Lear, rest in peace, amazing old man, who was ahead of his time in so many ways. White man, had power. And how did he use that power? He created All in the Family. Now, is All in the Family by modern sensibilities a perfect show around race? Absolutely not. But for its time,
it was quite progressive.
Very. It used its platform and the power that it had to make the jokes at the expense of the people with power. Archie Bunker was representative. He was a caricature of racist old white people, right? And the jokes were made at his expense, not at the expense of the women or the white or the Black folks. And when they were made at their expense, the jokes they would be like, it didn't work, right? Because it was like just showcasing him as the problematic person and other people having to say, that's not okay. And that was permission structure at that time for people to begin to challenge others with power, to question the norms, to push back, and then from there we had the spinoff, The Jeffersons, where people got to see a wealthy Black family, seeing that as a normalized sort of experience, this Black family living in a penthouse. And again, challenging so many of the norms, but the jokes were never at the expense of those. They were of the people who were the minority or the marginalized person in the room. They were the expense of the people with the oppressor identity. And that was such an important part of beginning to change that narrative in the population, of reducing the permission structure for the oppressive folks to show up that way. Do we remember when shame started around racism, where people actually started to be like, oh, I can't just be outwardly racist anymore. I want people to not be racist at all, right? Like that's where we want to get.
At the very least, they should be ashamed to do it in public.
Right. And what's happening now is we're seeing the flip side of that, where all that's being taken away and I can't imagine 10 or even 20 years ago, honestly, that lynching joke being made and the reaction in the room being laughter, because that was when there was still amongst white folks shame, or at least a knowledge that, oh, this isn't okay for me to do. What
Yeah.
has changed, right? And I just think it's so important. We can't just be so dismissive of these moments to say, oh, it's no big deal. Get over yourself.
Yeah.
When we see what's happening, Black people
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
losing rights.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the right to
Yeah.
personhood is what's happening here.
Yeah, and I think even beyond giving people in positions of power permission to do the things that they do, I think it's giving them permission to continue to do the things that they do, right? Like
Mhm.
for them, it's a pulse check of where people in the larger like culture are.
Absolutely.
Like everyone's laughing at this. Okay, it's okay for me to continue down this path. It's okay for me to like continue to make really bad decisions about how the policies I'm into or who I hire or how I operate my classroom is going to affect the livelihood of Black and brown people. Like, because they already feel like they can do this, like, they already have the power. So it's not about giving them permission to do it. It's about whether or not they feel like they can continue to do it with however little or however much pushback they might be getting. And apparently they're not getting any. So because everyone's laughing at it.
With how little apology, shame, reservation. You're right. Exactly.
Hmm.
That's it. You're right. It's not permission because they don't need permission when you are
Yeah.
the
When you
person
have
in
power, you
power.
don't need permission. You just do what you want.
But it's how much, what's the fight going to be? Do I have to, and so now you see people can't understand. I hear people like exasperated at the fact that these people are just so unapologetic now. They're just unapologetically flaunting their racism and whatever. And I can't believe it. But these sorts of moments are things that continue to contribute to that. When we continue to center a Black woman and challenging her degree and whether she lied about it. Now, is that right or wrong? Right? No, it's not right to do that. But when we make that the story, we are by, association, then slowly giving people that permission structure or that giving them the message that, yeah, just go ahead, keep on challenging Black women about what they know.
Mhm.
Right. Keep on
Mhm.
challenging Black women and saying that they're not that smart, whatever.
Mhm.
Right. Versus all of the, I don't even know that Mel Robbins has. I'm sure she's not a PhD. Probably doesn't even have a degree for
Mhm.
all I know, and she can just be
Mhm.
sitting there and grifting all she wants and without that same kind of challenge. And what does that say? Right. And certainly the likes of Tony Robbins and stuff. So
Yeah.
we can look at each of these things in isolation and say, it's not that big of a deal. But it is so disingenuous to do that because nothing exists in isolation. And
Yeah.
you said that so perfectly at the beginning. Like this is all happening inside of the larger experience that we're all going through right now, where we are systematically and really unapologetically stripping people, Black people, most especially, of their voice, of
Yeah.
their rights, of their representation. That matters an awful lot.
Yeah. It does.
And not to mention all the other things that are also happening around like bodily
Yeah.
autonomy. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
and again, when Chelsea Handler, ha ha ha, yep, I'm a 3, you wouldn't hit me. Like that is not that far of a stretch to get to why are we losing rights to choice, reproductive choice?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
don't have reproductive choice in rape culture. Your body
Yeah.
is just a
You
vessel.
don't. It's not yours. Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can say I'm uptight. I'm not fun at a party. I don't know how to laugh. I know how to laugh. I laugh at a lot of things, but I don't laugh at things that are like so clearly feeding into the the loss of my rights and the rights of the people that I
Mhm.
love.
Yeah. Yeah. It's no laughing matter.
I mean, yeah, I do laugh a lot too. Like
Yeah.
Parks and Rec. There are so many shows. Like I don't. Doesn't. There are so many shows and things that are funny because they speak to
That are
universal
funny. Yeah.
experiences. Because
Yeah.
they punch up. There's lots of humor that doesn't even require punching. By the way, like it
Yeah.
just speaks to the universal experience of being a human and like the
Yeah.
frustrations of sitting in traffic or whatever that we all deal with.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's great. Let's laugh at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I sound like I'm no fun, Taina?
No. No. Don't.
Thank you. Anything else
Don't.
that you want to talk about or add before we say our goodbyes?
No, I think this was a lot, and I know there are gonna be people who are just gonna take what they want from it, and to you, I say, "Fuck you." But to everyone else who actually listened and paid attention, thank you for being here and for giving us time in your day.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately, Taina, that's what I really hope this show does for people, or what I think is most interesting is when we
Mhm,
can thread those needles for people in ways that maybe they hadn't
mhm,
thought about. So if somebody, if
mhm,
anyone's listening, listening to this and had seen some of the rhetoric around the roast last week and were like, yeah, but why does it really matter? That's where I hope like this provides you just a little more depth of understanding and even a bit of ammunition so that when things like this come up again, you're able to question it and then fight back a little. Because that's what I think we just need those. We need people pushing back so that we don't continue to free people from their shame.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to be aggressive about it either. Just be like, oh, I didn't think that was funny. Or what was funny about that?
Yeah. And then, I mean, if you really want, you can say why. Yeah. What's funny
Can you
about
explain the joke to me here?
What's funny about a joke like that when Tennessee just got rid of the ability for Black people to basically have a vote? Tell me how that's funny. Yeah. And see what people have to say. Okay.
Yeah.
I know what
my favorite thing is weaponized ignorance. Oh, I don't get it. Can you explain it to me, please? Make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Make them say that part out loud.
Especially when you hold an oppressor or a privileged identity to be the person in the room that does that, especially when people in the room are holding the marginalized identity in question. And I'm speaking to all of us, but I can think many times where if only a white man would have done that in a room where I was and jokes about women, how the fist pump I would have had in my head. Like, so if that's you, know that it makes a difference, is meaningful to the people in the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll be back next week on the 26th, Tuesday the 26th, YouTube.
Tuesday the 26th.
Come join us for a live. We'll get it scheduled soon so you can find it. And actually, hopefully by the time this is out, it'll be scheduled so you can just click remind. Come join us and talk with us. And we're going to have some fun reminiscing. So thanks for being here. I was waiting for you to say. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.